Let's talk about Biden and Zelensky at the NATO summit and how my man Zelensky got fucking snubbed big time.
You know, I think there are very few people in Europe or in continental United States and the North American continent that thought this man would stand up and come to the aid and assistance of Ukraine. He increased his military budget. He stepped up Japan, because he understood that when any part of the world has 185,000 people, soldiers, crossing a border, stealing sovereignty from another nation, that it affects the whole world. I want to thank you again publicly.
This was literally one big fuck fest for Zell Disney getting cucked over and over again. It was weird. Zell Disney was, in many respects, the Adam 22 of the situation here. Like, just got married, gonna make a lot of money, don't get me wrong. A lot of weapons are coming his way, so he still ends up, like, leaving with a shitload of what he wanted from the start, but is just getting absolutely cumstered and dumpstered by one of the largest penises you've ever seen on camera. Everywhere you went, Zelensky was just like in the corner being like, can we join NATO? And everyone was like, no, of course not. Come on. Know your place. Like, even this brief interaction kind of shows you exactly what's going on here, where it's like, you assume Biden is going to start off by being like, Zelensky is the best. He's the hero of the story. And it's like, nope, it's Japan.
Just concluded the first meeting of the NATO-Ukraine Council, and where all our allies agreed Ukraine's future lies in NATO. That's not a surprise to any of us, I don't think. I hope it's not a surprise to you, Mr. President. Allies all agreed to lift the requirements for membership action plan for Ukraine and to create a path to NATO membership while Ukraine continues to make progress on necessary reforms. But we're not waiting for that process to be finished to make the long-term commitments that we're making to Ukraine's security. Vladimir and I shouldn't be so familiar. Mr. Zelensky and I talked about the kind of guarantees we could make in the meantime.
What?
When I was in Ukraine and when we met in other places. And so today, the long-term commitments we're making are backed up by the notion that in the meantime, we're going to provide security to Ukraine for its needs and against any aggression that may occur.
It's so funny that, like, Ukraine is not gay enough to join NATO. Look alive, Jack. You don't have enough they-thems in your military.
Today, the members of the G7 are launching a joint declaration of support for Ukraine to make it clear that our support will last long into the future. This starts a process by which each of our nations and any other nation who wishes to participate will negotiate long-term bilateral security commitments with and to Ukraine. We're going to help Ukraine build a strong, capable defense across land, air, and sea, from which will be a force of stability in the region and deter against any and all threats. I want to thank my fellow G7 leaders and President Zelensky for their work to make this happen. I think it's a powerful statement of our commitment to Ukraine as it defends its freedom today and as it rebuilds the future. And we're going to be there as long as that takes. And again, I thank all my colleagues for their support for this.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, President Biden, Prime Minister Kishida, Chancellor, see you, Chancellor Scholz, Prime Minister Sunak, President Macron, Prime Minister Trudeau, Prime Minister Meloni, President Michel, President von der Leyen. Great honor to be here.
Literally a fascist, by the way.
The outcome of the NATO summit in Vilnius is very much needed and meaningful success for Ukraine. And I'm grateful to all leaders in NATO countries for very practical and unprecedented support, considering decades of our relations support for Ukraine. Today, there are security guarantees for Ukraine on the way to NATO, an important package of security guarantees. Today, we are coordinating with the G7 countries the framework for security guarantees that shall be further extended through arrangements with our key partners, bilateral and multilateral agreements. And Ukrainian delegation is bringing home significant security victory for the Ukraine, for our country, for our people, for our children. It opens for us absolutely new security opportunities, and I thank everyone who made it possible. Thank you, dear colleagues. Thanks you. Thanks, Lithuania and Jens Stoltenberg. Thank you very much. Slava Ukraini.
President Biden made very clear that, look, this joint declaration is all about a long-lasting future of security for Ukraine, that the U.S. and other NATO allies will be involved in. Tell us about the significance of this, even though they're not getting NATO membership at this particular summit.
Why do you think Japan is there? Japan is not a member of NATO? Talking about important asset in the North Atlantic. Japan. They got the Kuril Islands, dude. The Kuril Island dispute is what is heating up here. You know what I mean? I'm joking. I don't know why there's this song and dance being played. I don't think anybody thinks that Ukraine is joining NATO. I think it's like kind of fucked up to very excitedly and elatedly welcome Sweden into NATO while simultaneously dangling fucking NATO membership in Ukraine's face when everybody knows that that's not happening. Like, even if the rest of the Ukrainian invasion is like purged, while Crimea is still an active territorial dispute, Ukraine can't join NATO regardless. But there's a reason why Japan is there, and that's because NATO is just America. It's an extension of America's interests around the world. It's another way for the United States of America to uphold America's military superiority and hegemonic power. Calm the fuck down at this point. Calm the fuck on at this point. This gets in the Japanese far right's long-term plan to remilitarize with America's blessing with aims to check China. Yeah. Why isn't the USA giving Ukraine weapons seen as them being in war by the Russians? I don't know. It's just like military-industrial complex on both sides making money. It's seen as like there's like boundaries and arbitrary restrictions that they abide by, which they violate as time passes. Like no long-range weapons that could technically hit Russian soil was the original boundary. No fighter jets were the original boundary. Most of those have been violated. Just a way to like ease the restrictions slowly but surely. But there are restrictions that will not pass. Like no-fly zone over Ukraine, because that's active. That turns this war into a war between, not a proxy war, but a war between the United States and allies against Russia.
Yeah, really what President Biden and these leaders are trying to do is put behind some of the tension that arose heading into this summit about the fact that Ukraine would not be offered a concrete timeline into NATO. And instead, they are trying to show what they can offer Ukraine in the here and now and also long term down the road. This declaration that was announced today by the president and G7 leaders will essentially jumpstart talks between each of the countries to have these bilateral long term security commitments. President Biden saying that the support will last long into the future. And what officials, and you also heard the president there stress, is that they want to ensure that Ukraine not just has the ability to defend themselves now, but can also deter and defend themselves against other future aggression. And so much of this is trying to send a message directly to Russia. That is what this entire summit has really been about for President Biden, as he's been trying to show the strength and unity of NATO, especially as we've also learned that NATO could soon be expanding as Sweden could join the alliance. And what the president has repeatedly trying to point to is that the U.S. is one of the strongest backers of Ukraine as far as sending military aid to the country. And now they're going to try to extend these long-term security commitments to them into the future. And so in just a short while, we will also see President Biden and Zelensky sit down one-on-one, face-to-face for a private meeting. We expect reporters will be allowed into a portion of that, which will be another show of unity that the president can demonstrate against Russia as Vladimir Putin continues to wage this war against Ukraine. As officials here at the...
For the record, I don't... like the Ukraine will never join NATO take is outdated in my opinion. There is a very realistic likelihood that Ukraine, given what happens in the invasion, post-invasion could potentially, but that would also imply that Russia is like completely crippled, or maybe even a power vacuum in the absence of like Vladimir Putin. There's so many different variables here. Russia has also said Ukraine joining NATO would mean war. Yeah, what do you mean? War is already happening. It's like, oh no, will there be war? That certainly would be a weird and terrifying prospect. War 2, double war. They said the same thing about Finland. Yeah, it doesn't matter because, you want to know why it doesn't matter? Because Vladimir Putin gave the greatest gift of all to the American military apparatus, the American military-industrial complex, and the warmongering American generals that were fantasizing about this. He won, galvanized their position that Russia truly is bloodthirsty and mad. So there's need for a protection racket. But he also showed them that Russia is not strong enough to take over Ukraine. So at that point, it's like, that's the best possible thing you can do. That's the reason why Finland felt comfortable joining NATO. They can't take over fucking Ukraine. What are they going to do? Are they going to go to Finland now? Opponent's too strong and too weak, you say? Well, that's the American position always against our enemies. But my point is this, okay? They're landlocked into battle, doing trench warfare, using artillery over Ukraine, and are incapable of taking over the Eastern Front adequately and securing it adequately. If they can't fucking do that, then what are they going to do? Are they going to go then spread out into Finland? Like, no fucking shot, which is part of the reason why the Finnish government felt significantly more comfortable joining NATO. Not only did it show that they are irresponsible and crazy, which means that there needs to be which legitimized the fears that people had for some kind of, some kind of security deal with NATO, but it also showed that like there will be no serious negative consequences in the form of like actual land invasion.
The summit have been arguing that the shows of strength, the shows of unity and support for Ukraine and within the alliance show that Putin's war is backfiring against the very thing that he had hoped against.
And as we've been watching, as you were talking, Arlette, we were watching live the family photo of the G7 leaders in the gathering with Ukrainian President Zelensky. Nick, what does that photo represent? What does this moment represent?
Yeah, I think what we just witnessed is President Zelensky being the consummate diplomat for Ukraine. He may not have gotten quite what he wanted, but he took it well. Look, the version of Zelensky we had yesterday was the warrior diplomat coming in, charging, demanding something that given a timeline. Absurd that he didn't get it, he said. But there he was standing on the stage with the leaders of the G7 nations and a couple of EU presidents presidents there as well, and he called them all out by name, thanked them all by name. This is him being a diplomat, and I think the piece of diplomacy that wrapped it up there, and this is what is signaling back home, and I think is signaling that he feels he got as far as he could go. He said, we can bring back home a significant security victory. So he is telling his people and is telling his interlocutors that he's got as good as he could get, that these security guarantees that will be negotiated, these long-term guarantees and partnerships that would now begin to be negotiated, this is good. This is what he wanted. He didn't get 100% of what he wanted, but he's got enough to take home. And
It's pretty funny. US and UK call for more gratitude from Kyiv after Zelensky's NATO complaint. Comments come after Ukrainian leader complained his country had not been given firm timetable for joining alliance. They're like, know your place, know where your bread is buttered, and say thank you. Let's be fucking real. It's not wrong. Kyiv or Ukraine barely had a fucking standing army in 2014, okay? It took almost 10 years of actual training and arming Ukraine to have a standing army against Russia. One that has actually put up a pretty decent fight without turning it into a counterinsurgency or without turning it into an insurgency movement. I don't even think Zelensky thinks Ukraine is going to be joining NATO anytime soon. I think he just has to posture like this to make it seem like he's doing something for the Ukrainian people. Like, because the Ukrainian people want to join NATO for obvious reasons. So he just has to posture, knowing full well that all he's going to get is weapons, a steady flow of weapons, ultimately. It's similar to the Kurdish position, right? Understandable request by Kurdish people, the largest ethnic diaspora on the planet, with 35 million people without a nation state. Kurdish militia groups in the region have had long-standing and oftentimes very volatile security arrangements with the American State Department. This is not a secret. This is a well-known, well-established allegiance. Why would they do this? Well, they do this because America dangles the carrot of a Kurdistan nation state in front of the Kurds, only to weaponize Kurdish militia forces as a destabilizing group in the region, and oftentimes uses the Kurdish militias as a way to fight some of the other terror cells that they've actually created in the region. The terror cells that they've created in the region, such as ISIS. And then they turn around and leave the Kurds behind and go back to their long-standing security commitments and allegiances and allow the Turks to come in and just roll over all of the Kurdish towns that have been created and leave the Turkish militia and Turkish military to just fucking bomb the shit out of like the northern Syrian corridor, for example. But with Kurdish people, they have no choice. They see this as an allegiance. They see the United States allegiance as a necessity because they're like, well, we have nothing else. We have no other opportunity. We have no other alternative. And the Kurds know that America will fuck them over, as they have done historically since the 90s, over and over and over again. And yet they still join forces when they can. This is what's going on at a higher level with Ukraine. Ukrainian people are, the difference between Ukrainian people and Kurdish people, however, is that the Ukrainian people haven't fully realized that America has no real interest in like ridding Ukraine of Russian forces, and are more so committed to sending a steady flow of weapons, especially ones that are no longer usable or considered too old by the American military. It's a great way to, it's basically like an endless surplus program. Another alternative is for the military-industrial complex to test out weapons. But because of Ukraine's established nation-state status, I think a lot of people believe that America ultimately has an emancipatory interest in Ukraine and Ukrainian security, when I don't think that that is their main purpose. I think their main purpose is to engage Ukraine as a destabilizing force against Russia and keep them in as endless conflict as possible that continues as they sell as many weapons as possible to Ukraine. There are other economic factors at play. For example, the selling of natural gas to Europe, like squeezing Russia out of the market and trying to get Europe to purchase American natural gas instead of Russian. Like, there are other economic factors at play here. But ultimately, it's about money. I think the self-limiting of sending arms to Ukraine is more a political play than money, than about money, like you say. What political play? The American war machine is untouchable. And oftentimes people don't even give a shit. The American media will do PR for the war in Ukraine and how it's the most just war that America has ever engaged in. And there is some truth to at least like there is actually truth to Ukraine's need for emancipation. I think that's a just cause. But America's involvement and what they are interested in Ukraine is entirely separate, regardless of what the Western media portrays it as. But even if they didn't fucking do that, even if it was like a wholly unpopular thing politically to support Ukraine, it wouldn't matter, because when is the last time the American government has done something that you think is good for you? They don't have to do that at all. That's why we have a two-party duopoly where you're locked into voting for one party over the other because it's going to be marginally better or marginally less worse. Western news bubble Hasan. So stuck in the Western bubble. Wait, hold on. This is awesome. This guy basically made an account again. Are we still trapped in the Western media bubble now that doesn't matter anymore? Do you ever watch Al Jazeera or anything except Twitter? Your takes are not valid otherwise. You only eat up Western media. Your takes do not matter. Go watch Al Jazeera or Russian TV, you fucking America Nazi dog. The West equals done. Not even Europe likes you. I'm so amused with the struggle of the USA failing as a world power. We do not want you, USA. So stuck in the Western bubble. Can't even see Ukraine gets fucked in their bunker war now. Yes, fuck USA. Yeah, to what extent do America's true intentions with Ukraine actually matter? Well, Ukraine can only continue fighting Russia as long as there's a steady flow of weapons coming in from the West through NATO partners. So America's true intentions with Ukraine matter quite a bit. It matters a lot. Like, let's say, I'm not saying that this is the case, but let's say there is a unique hypothetical circumstance where Russia's like, we are losing the war of attrition here. We've depleted all of our munitions. We have nothing remaining. We want to come to the table. We want to engage in ceasefire agreements and potentially negotiate an end to the war. If the United States' true interests lie on the continuation of the war, and they are the most important party in this in the negotiations process, which they are, then how can you say that it doesn't matter what their true allegiances are? If their true allegiance is to continue the war and just destroy Russia in its entirety by using Ukraine as a proxy, well, they're going to say, fuck no, we're not going to do any sort of ceasefire negotiations. They're going to tell Ukraine they're going to nudge Ukraine under the table to not even have these conversations. Now, what I mentioned is not necessarily a hypothetical, even though I am scared to mention any Russian involvement as like towards peacefire is like genuine because everyone fucking yells at me. But something of the like did happen in Antalya in Turkey. And Boris Johnson was the one who famously said the 15-point ceasefire plan is, not going to happen. But anyway, Zelensky and his NATO membership strategy are thrown under the bus by the Biden administration. Quell surprise. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has confirmed the alliance will issue an invitation for Ukraine to join the alliance when allies agree and conditions are met, and that the process of the country's membership would move from a two-step to a one-step pathway. A communique outlining how Ukraine could join NATO has been published by members of the alliance. We will be in a position to extend an invitation to Ukraine to join the alliance when allies agree and conditions are met. It's amazing and revealing that Zelensky and many pundits believed or pretended to believe that U.S.-led NATO would admit Ukraine during war and would be willing to turn Ukraine-Russia war into a NATO-Russia proxy war, into a conventional nuclear war between NATO and Russia. Even Ukraine joining NATO after the war is in big doubt because Ukraine has no real chance of defeating Russia. Well, after the war would imply that it does have a chance of defeating Russia. It would imply that Russia is no longer the Russia that it is currently. That's why I say, depending on how things happen, Ukraine could very likely join NATO because something unimaginable in the course of war has already occurred. Unimaginable, not like necessarily as a bad thing. I'm saying like unimaginable is in like a really, really extreme change in how the war is currently being conducted has occurred. And like Russia is depleted of its resources. It has no power. You know what I mean? Like Putin dies to a freak accident or something. You know what I mean? NATO Secretary General, because unless Ukraine wins this war, there's no membership issue to be discussed at all. By the way, that's not my words. That is the NATO Secretary General's words. So that's my point. This confirms that Ukraine NATO membership, even after this war, is in big doubt since Ukraine has no real chance of winning the war with Russia. Zelensky says he has no faith. He has faith in NATO, but not confidence after alliance cannot offer a membership timetable. A peer-reviewed article in 2011, conflicts have a negative impact on NATO enlargement, while the level of economic development has a positive effect on EU enlargement. Being a post-Soviet country has a negative effect on both NATO and EU accession. As I said many times before, based on my academic research, White House says Ukraine joining NATO in the immediate future isn't likely. So NATO membership in the immediate future isn't likely because that would put NATO at war with Russia. Zelensky fails in an effort to secure an invitation to join NATO at the Vilnius summit. Leaders of the military alliance sign off on declaration that does not give Ukraine firm membership timetable. The frustrated Ukrainian president has accused Joe Biden and other leaders present at the summit in the Lithuanian capital, Vilnius, of showing disrespect and complained that there was no readiness to invite his country to join. Yet, no shit. This photo is pretty funny, though. I saw this and I was like, God damn, dude, you guys, like, snubbed him. Look at this. They're like, they don't know I'm single-handedly engaging in a proxy war for Western military-industrial complex interests. Like, it's like the me at the corner at the party meme. Like, no, this is crazy. In yet another very symbolic photo, Zelensky is not even included in the group photo of NATO summit in Vilnius. They literally didn't add him to the photo. Ukraine would bear consequences of Zelensky's failed strategy and gamble against all odds. This was as predictable and as avoidable as the Ukraine-Russia war. Yet another very symbolic photo from the NATO summit. And another one which Zelensky could have easily avoided. Zelensky spotted in Vilnius for the NATO summit. How is Ukraine a proxy war? They're literally getting invaded. Oh my God, I'm going to lose my mind. No one thinks that Ukraine is like responsible for being invaded by Russia. Or at least no one in this community, or at least I certainly don't. There might be some people who believe that. It is a proxy war because of the interests of the other parties involved in it. Too short to get Ukraine into NATO? Oh, Jesus Christ. Chad has no context in Vietnam or Korea either. It is developed into a proxy war. That picture is the result of a Photoshop. What is this? Guy blocked me as well. For every 10 retweets this get, I will shrink President Zelensky slightly. No! I failed to understand the correct take here. You suck on this topic. I would prefer nuclear war with Russia, pussy. I just want to know. I want to know what these guys think. The people that say you suck on this topic, like, what's your perspective? That, like, it's very real that America was like genuinely interested in allowing Ukraine to join NATO, or that America legitimately cares about Ukrainian emancipation. I'm sorry. Any moment where you like legitimately say America is in it for democracy is a moment that you are a mark. You are a rube. What is this, brother? Everyone's bad on this topic because there's no one besides like 10 people know what's actually going on. I don't understand why people refuse to even consider the possibility that the state is not just totally pure and uncorrupt here. Media. There's a lot. I have a hard time coming to terms with the issue of the U.S. being involved. Like, is it necessary just for the military-industrial complex? I mean, it wouldn't work. It would be significantly... Ukraine's chances would be significantly worse without American involvement, let's be real. I mean, it would still be an awful prospect for Russia. Anyway, let's watch this.
We all want this war to end on just terms. Terms that uphold the basic principles of the United Nations Charter that we all signed up to. Sovereignty, territorial integrity. These are two pillars of peaceful relations among nations. One country cannot be allowed to seize its neighbor's territory by force. Russia could end this war tomorrow by withdrawing its forces from Ukraine, wrecking its international borders, and ceasing its attacks on it, its inhumane attacks on Russia. I mean, by Russia on Ukraine, against its children, women and children, its military. Unfortunately, Russia has shown thus far no interest in the diplomatic outcome. Putin still wrongly believes that he can outlast Ukraine. He can't believe it's their land, their country, and their future. And even after all this time, Putin still doubts our staying power. He's still making a bad bet that the conviction and the unity among the United States and our allies and partners will break down. He still doesn't understand that our commitment, our values, our freedom is something he can never, never, ever, ever walk away from. It's who we are. I mean, it's who we are. It's who we are.
Damn, dude, powerful words.
He knows he's pushed it as far as he can go this time. But we've all seen Zelensky before. He will keep this up about trying to get NATO membership, making sure it's fast-tracked, thanking everyone for everything that they've done, thanking them for taking out one of the steps to membership, pointing out that they've been doing a lot together already, and that helps the situation, and that shows that Ukraine is on the right path, postured and positioned to become a European Union member as well as a NATO member. So yes, this was the diplomat, the real consummate diplomat version of Zelensky we just witnessed.
Thanks, Nick Robertson, for that analysis. Let's go to Kim Dozier. I want to ask you about NATO itself and where it's at right now, because back when Donald Trump was president, it was no secret that at one point he discussed pulling the U.S. out of NATO and trying to sort of weaken that alliance. How does what happened in this particular very important summit strengthen NATO? You've got one more country that is now going to be allowed in, and does this put a lot of pressure on Vladimir Putin?
Well, it does bring it up to 32 once Sweden is officially in. Of course, Hungary's parliament has to ratify that first, as well as Turkey. But what it does is send a powerful message to Moscow that, combined with these new security guarantees towards Ukraine, that this is a marathon for NATO, not a sprint. That if you thought that you, Vladimir Putin, could wait us out and use the mass of your population, 4 times the size of Ukraine, to grind them down, we're going to be here the whole time, keeping them supplied. And we're also going to be we're going to keep sanctioning you. We're going to keep putting you under economic duress. So the combination is NATO stronger, bringing Sweden and Finland in. They both actually have pretty advanced defense industries. That strengthens NATO militarily. So overall, this is a win-win for NATO and lose-lose for Moscow. And one last thing, Biden aligning himself in this way with Ukraine will make it really hard if there's a change in U.S. presidents come the next election for any future president to back away from this support.
Alabama Senator Tommy Tuberville is coming.
It would be really funny if the Democrats try to run on, we need to continue. We can't let up. We can't lose to Donald Trump because then Donald Trump won't arm Ukraine as a narrative. I would lose my fucking mind. Oh, God. Oh, God. Oh, my God. Can you imagine Democrats literally being like, listen, Jack, healthcare, fuck you. Student loan debt relief, double suck. You need to vote for us now, Sweaty. Why? Because we are the pathway to Ukraine's freedom.